Benjakitti Park is a great place to visit if you like running or taking photos. I like both, yet for a long time I never knew quite what to do here, since the park is often empty in the daytime. Whenever I came here, I would spend my time just getting to know the city's birds. This bird seems to spend much of the day nibbling away at mollusks, discarding their shells along the shoreline. That's not a bad way to spend the day, I suppose, but what else is there to do here? The park has an 800-meter-long pond, in the center of which is a large walkway and stage. This stage is a popular photography hotspot, as people enjoy having their portraits taken in front of the skyline behind. In my opinion, since the skyline is uneven, I think it's better to zoom in to omit the taller buildings on the right-hand side. Arguably, the entire park is a bit of a photography hotspot, and one of the most common sights to see here is university students getting their graduation photos taken by professional photographers. The other major activity is running. Encircling the pond is a 2-kilometer track that gets busy later in the day when the weather cools down. Of course, only a mad person would run at noon under a tropical sun. Accompanying me on my run was a monitor lizard, and I was rather surprised when, later in the day, I saw him tunnel down to somewhere beneath the city. I'd never seen that before. Perhaps there's a more exclusive running track somewhere further down that you and I don't know about and aren't invited to. Personally, what I like most about this section of the park is not the running track nor the photo shoots. What I like is to watch the reflections that neighboring buildings cast into the pond below. This high-end condominium complex is called the Millennium Residence, and I really like the patterns it creates in the water, patterns which remind me of Damascus steel. Whenever I come here, I try to photograph these reflections, but while the patterns are nice, I think that without some human element, the photo is not that interesting. Fortunately, visitors can borrow canoes and pedalos to ride on the pond, and when I can, I like to photograph the canoes as they sail through these reflections. The pond is vast and rowers are few, so it doesn't happen as often as you might think. Since I often come to Benjakitti in the daytime, when there are few people around, I spend a lot of time photographing birds. This one is called the Asian openbill. If you're a traveler visiting the park for a day, I think a pair of binoculars would make your trip a lot more enjoyable. Beside the pond is a thin stretch of park with winding lanes, hedges and flowers, a tiny little playground, and a number of architectural features and monuments. In the middle of the park is a large viewing platform with a statue of a lotus at its center. The lotus is an important symbol here, and a wide range of these species can now be seen in the park's central forest area. I really like the timeless look of the staircases and lampposts that surround the lotus statue, though I do wonder what this area is supposed to be used for. One lamppost in particular caught my eye. I'm not sure who had the strength to rip it from its base. The person responsible must have been a man of extraordinary strength. One thing about Benjakitti Park that I do find unusual is that I rarely see children playing here. I suspect the half-dismantled skate ramp and the tiny little playground have something to do with it. However, occasionally the park does host some temporary events, and when it does, I think it becomes a far more interesting place to visit. In my opinion, the presence of children playing brings some much-needed life and energy to this place, and I wish the park would host these events much more frequently, or turn these little games and activities into permanent fixtures. If not for the kids, then at least for the photographers who need something to photograph. The scenes here are from an event earlier this year, which encouraged children to go out, climb high, challenge themselves, and to take risks. I visited with my friend and his young daughter, and she had a wonderful time. While I was there, I spent some time trying to take a photo of an elderly woman who was watching these kids play on this giant hammock. I took the photo because I thought there was an interesting juxtaposition between youth and high energy on the one hand, and old age and fatigue on the other. I like to think that the woman was imagining the games that she used to play with her friends when she was a girl of around the same age. To the west of this is an area of the park sometimes referred to as the Central Forest or Agroforestry Garden. Here, pathways and skywalks lead the visitor across wetlands which are filled with lotus and other aquatic plants. Although there are set routes, I think it's also worth wandering off the beaten track to get a little closer to the plants and birds. This is by far my favorite part of the park, as I like being close to the water, seeing the plants and animals up close, and looking at the reflections of the bridge that get cast into the wetlands below. An idea I had for a photo was to wait for a solitary figure to stand above the pillar of this bridge, then photograph the reflection and flip it upside down. I'm pretty happy with this result. The ground level pathways through the wetlands are a real joy to walk through, particularly the parts that are lined with lotus flowers or with tall green grass. The most common sights to see here are gardeners and their bicycles. Sometimes I photograph the gardeners, but on this occasion what caught my eye was a small pink bike. I was drawn, of course, to the vivid colours, and I especially like the second image here. One detail I'd like to point out is the small bird in the top corner. This is a fairly symmetrical scene, but one element that disrupts the symmetry is the fact that the grass is taller on the left-hand side than on the right. Fortunately, this little bird swooped down at just the right moment and helped to redress the balance. The alternative route across the wetlands is to walk along the elevated skywalks that stretch across this section of the park. These walkways get very crowded in the evenings, so it's better to come early if you want to go for a run or a juggle. Once again, a very common sight to see here is photographers doing photo shoots with young people in graduation outfits, or couples having their pre-wedding photos taken. Benjakitti often feels much more like a large outdoor photo studio than it does a traditional park. But I suppose it's easy to see why people are drawn here for that purpose, since there are innumerable views which may serve as idyllic backdrops for photo shoots. Perhaps the nicest views here are those at the top of the little viewing platforms. Up here you can see the numerous types of lotus, which, if you're lucky, might be in bloom during your visit. You can also see a 360-degree view of the various types of trees planted here, which includes species like wild olive, horseradish, and roseapple. And behind all this, there is a panoramic view of the city's ever-growing skyline. The scene feels very much like it could be the subject of a painting by Claude Monet, and I'm sure a painter could spend many happy hours here, especially at sunset, which, I think, is the best time to come. At this time of day on the other side of the park, hundreds of people show up for their daily run. There it is crowded, but here it is tranquil. On this day I spent a lot of time kneeling at this spot because an Asian openbill was hunting for food quite close to me. I was waiting for it to walk towards a plank of wood so I could photograph it in a particular spot. I like the composition with the plank of wood because it leads the viewer towards the subject, and I like the way the beak and the timber run parallel to one another. As the sun sets, the atmosphere here changes significantly. The park in the evening is a very different place, but perhaps that's the subject for another video. I hope you've enjoyed my little guide to Benjakitti Park, or perhaps found it useful. If you have, please leave a comment down below. Kopken Club.